Bluetti has introduced their new expansion battery, the B300K, which they have sent for me to do some testing for you. I thought this would be a worthwhile look since they have changed almost everything about the battery, and it gives me a chance to show the long-term performance of the old version. They aren't paying me to run this analysis, but they have given me some exclusive discount codes for you that I'll put in the description below, and if you use those links, it does help out the channel a little bit. That being said, I always run the tests that I think are most important, and then you can judge for yourself if it meets your needs. Welcome back to Projects with Everyday Dave. It's time to look at how this new battery compares to the old one. And a bonus, we'll see how the performance has changed after a year of continuous use on this old battery. Let's briefly review the key differences between the B300 and the B300K. For starters, the price on the new battery is much lower, and I think Bluetti's objective was to try and lower the threshold for expanding the battery capacity on your system. With the current pricing, that drops the cost per watt hour from 52 cents per watt hour to 43 cents per watt hour. So that's pretty significant. The new package is a couple inches shorter and 14.5 pounds lighter. So even though it's still pretty heavy, it is much easier to move around. They both use the stable lithium iron phosphate chemistry, but the new ones are a higher grade prism cell, giving us the higher 4,000 plus cycle life as opposed to the previous cylindrical cell configuration. I popped the covers off so we can take a peek inside and see how it's built. Both batteries are the stable lithium iron phosphate chemistry, but the new ones have a higher grade prism cell that gives them the 4,000 plus life cycle as opposed to the previous generation battery which used the cylindrical cell configuration. The new battery is built very well. Each pack of 8 cells are completely protected by a heavy gauge metal enclosure, and it includes compression plates to control the expansion and dendrite growth in the batteries, and that's what helps give them a longer life. You can barely see the cells, they're packaged in there so tightly, but there are 16 cells, 8 in each row, and they're together in series, and that gives us the nominal 51.2 volt configuration. The whole package is inset from the outside of the case by quite a bit, so if there's any damage to the outside of the case, it's pretty unlikely it's actually going to hit the cells. And the electronics themselves are well protected with really heavy gauge steel brackets that support the top of the lid. These prism cells are a lot tighter package and much lighter, and that allows us to make the entire battery smaller and lighter, easier to carry around. This is a really nice layout. It was also a lot easier to take apart than the old one. Not that you should take this apart. Do not, under any circumstance, take this apart. There are high voltage and really high current connections in here. If you were to connect across the positive and negative terminals, it would be a very unfortunate event. But I just wanted to open it up so you could see what was in there and see how well built this battery is. The new battery has a slightly lower rated capacity at 2,765 watt hours versus the previous 3,072 watt hours. The negative here is it drops below the 3 kilowatt hour threshold for receiving the tax incentive for a home battery backup system. Of course, that's not an issue if you're getting at least 2 batteries. One way they've cut the cost of the new battery is by removing some of the electronics, which has also helped reduce the size. The new B300K has only one USB-A port and it's 14 watts. The old B300 had a lot of extra electronics supporting extra features. It had an independent 60 volt 10 amp solar charging input and an 8 amp DC charging input to charge it independently from the main inverter. It also had a 100 watt USB-C port, an 18 watt USB-A port, and a 12 volt 10 amp cigarette lighter port. As much as I like all these extra features, it's probably not worth the cost that you have to pay to get them all. And if I was going to make one change on this, rather than putting a USB-A port, it would have been nice if they had put a 100 watt USB-C port. I don't think that would have cost a whole lot more, but would have added a lot more flexibility for using the battery by itself. Now, one important thing to note, when Bluetti dropped the 12 volt port on the battery, that's really important because the AC300 has an unusual setup for managing the DC output. It has a 24 volt car adapter port, which is great for some higher power appliances like my refrigerator cooler, which uses a 24 volt output. However, many appliances that utilize that form factor can only handle 12 volts. So be careful to check the specs of your device, because if you plug a 12 volt appliance into the 24 volt port, it may not survive. With the elimination of that port on the B300 battery, if you need a 12 volt car port, you can solve that by using the AC300 high output 12 volt 30 amp port. Not many units have a 30 amp output, so that's really nice, but you need to get a special cord to utilize it. If you order the cord from Bluetti, and I'll link to it in the description below, it comes with an XT60 end, and it also comes with an adapter from XT60 to Anderson. Then you can just attach that to the 30 amp port and plug whatever you want to in here. The XT60 is pretty universal, and I was able to get an XT60 to 12 volt cigarette lighter off of Amazon for about 10 bucks. And I'll link to that in the description below in case you want to get one. I've been running my AC300 for over a year now, and if you haven't seen my testing video of the full AC300 system, you should check it out. The Bluetti AC300 has some unique characteristics that set it apart from the industry for flexibility and creative usability. I'll link to it up here somewhere and in the description below, and maybe at the end of the video as well. I have 1200 watts of used solar panels lying on the ground connected to the solar input, and it's been powering my dehumidifier in my shop. As a result, over the past year, my B300 batteries have been exposed to a nearly complete charge-discharge cycle every day. In addition to that, I wasn't paying attention and accidentally over-discharged them in the middle of the winter by leaving them completely discharged in the cold for several weeks. I made a video on how I managed to recover them if you're interested. With all that cycling and abuse, it's time to see how much capacity this has lost. I did a capacity test when I first got them and they were new, and we'll run another one now. And I'll also compare that to the B300K. I like to use my water heater as the dump load for AC tests. It provides a nice, consistent mid-load and allows me to capture the waste energy to hot water. The inverter provides almost 1500 watts at 120 volts and 12.5 amps. The inverter was completely silent most of the time, with only a low-level fan cycling periodically. This is the exact same test I ran when the B300 batteries were new, so it'll be a really good comparison after a year of use for the B300, and it'll give us apples-to-apples comparison to the B300K. I put all the numbers together in this chart so we can compare them directly. Curiously, the B300 and B300K got almost exactly the same result with their first run. 89% for the B300K and 89.1% for the B300. Now I have an additional result to add. After 1 year of torture, the B300 achieved 84.4% of its rated capacity. I didn't think that was too bad considering what I did to it, and the B300K has a higher cycle count spec, so I expect a year later to be even better for this unit. The change in runtime for the B300 over 1 year was only a reduction of 4 minutes with the loss of 143 watt hours of capacity. I ran the test on both batteries. The results were very close and I averaged them together. I did the same for the B300K. I ran the test on both batteries, averaged the result together. The results for both tests were almost exactly the same, so I think the test is pretty reliable for any battery that you would get. Also, even though the B300K is a little bit smaller battery, the runtime is still very close at 1 hour and 39 minutes versus the B300 when it was brand new at 1 hour and 48 minutes. If you already have B300 batteries like I do, but you want to expand, it's not a problem. You can add B300K batteries and run them all together. I've tried it for several weeks now. They charge and discharge together fairly well. However, if you don't bring them to 100% periodically, they will drift apart and you'll have one battery at 40% and one at 5% or something like that. But that's no different if all the batteries were exactly the same. Just realize you need to make sure that the whole pack gets charged up to 100% at least once a week. Connecting the batteries is really easy. There are 2 main ports for the batteries, and the batteries can be daisy chained. So I'll connect the B300s on port 2 and the B300Ks on port 1. Then I can connect the solar to the DC input. And if you want to have AC backup, you can plug that in as well. I usually keep that connected so I don't have another problem like I did last winter where I let it go completely discharged and it stayed that way for several days. This will make sure there's at least a minimum charge. There we go. I really like this cart. It makes it much easier to move the batteries around. They stack nicely, and the B300Ks actually fit under this bar and still leaves access to the B300 outlets and ports if you wanted to be able to use those. Maybe you have a configuration like I do with half of one and half of the other. And then it puts the main unit up high with easy access. Not many manufacturers make a nice cart to go with their systems, so I really like this setup. The only negative is the cords stick out quite a ways on the side, but otherwise it's pretty compact setup, so I like it. Right now, the B300K is significantly discounted for the launch, and you can get an additional discount on top of that using the discount codes and the link in the description below. A few of those discount codes only last for a few days, so be sure and check them out right away. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.